Welcome back, everyone. We're about to take a deep dive today into, well, how should I put it? The chaotic birth of the personal computer revolution.
Chaotic's a good word for it.
It is, but more specifically, the even more chaotic birth of Microsoft.
Oh, yeah.
And our guide for this trip, well, it's Bill Gates' own words from his book, The Road Ahead, Chapter 13 to be exact.
Right.
Now think about this. Today, software, it's everywhere, right?
It really is.
Runs our phones, our cars, our lives, you name it.
Yeah.
But back then, the very idea of paying for software, well, let's just say it was pretty mind-boggling to most folks.
I can imagine.
So how did Microsoft become the giant it is today, starting from, well, practically nothing?
That is the question, isn't it?
It is, and that's what we're here to uncover. Let's dive in.
It's interesting, to think back to how different things were then.
Oh, I bet.
I mean, we tend to picture the tech industry starting in Silicon Valley, all sleek and shiny.
Yeah.
But this story, it actually begins in a, well, would you believe it, a converted sandwich shop in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
It's a sandwich shop.
Yeah. That's where this guy, Ed Roberts, sets up shop with his company, MI Sus.
Mites, right?
And they're building this thing called the Altair 8800, which, well, lots of folks consider it to be the first real, true personal computer.
You're kidding. A sandwich shop turned computer factory.
No kidding. Imagine it. Long tables, all cobbled together from plywood, parts, and wires everywhere you look.
Oh.
And orders were just pouring in, way faster than they could even handle them.
That's wild. So this wasn't some fancy Silicon Valley operation.
Nope. This was like a strip mall operation with a laundromat next door, maybe a massage parlor on the other side.
No way. That just showed you how nobody expected this whole personal computer thing to, take off the way it did, huh?
Yeah, it really does.
So who were these first people buying these computers? Was it all, tech geniuses and engineers?
Yeah. It was a pretty diverse bunch, actually, but they all had this one thing in common. They were just dying to explore this whole new world of technology.
That makes sense.
Sure, you had your engineers, your hobbyists, people who loved tinkering with electronics.
Right.
But there were also, teachers, artists, even carpenters,
Oh.
all drawn to the potential of this new machine, even if it couldn't do that much, at least not at first.
I see. It's like they just knew this was something big.
Exactly.
Gates mentions this guy in his book, Steve Dompier, who, get this, programmed his Altair to play music.
Really?
On an AM radio.
No way.
Yeah. Can you imagine? It just shows you how much people were willing to experiment, to figure things out on their own.
That's so cool.
Isn't it? That kind of ingenuity, it's amazing.
It really is.
And this whole collaborative spirit, it was nurtured by these groups the Homebrew Computer Club.
Oh, yeah, the Homebrew Computer Club.
They were a big deal in those early days, right?
Huge. They were the heart of the movement.
So tell me more about them. What made them so special?
Well, picture this. You've got this group of tech enthusiasts meeting up in a garage in Menlo Park.
Okay.
And they're sharing ideas, swapping code, basically building the foundation for what would become the personal computer revolution.
Wow, right there in a garage.
And it wasn't some exclusive club,
Yeah.
Nope. It was open to anyone who was interested in computers, no matter who they were or what they did.
That's so cool. So you had all these different people from all walks of life coming together to build this new future.
Exactly. It was a real melting pot of ideas fueled by this almost counterculture ethos.
A counterculture ethos.
Yeah. They believed that computers should be accessible to everyone, that knowledge should be shared,
Oh, I see.
It was really something special.
I bet the energy in that room was incredible.
Oh, it was electric.
So this is where a young Bill Gates enters the scene.
Right.
Fresh out of Harvard, heads straight to Albuquerque to see what this Altair thing is all about.
Yep, that's right.
I mean, Gates was already a programming whiz, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah. He and his buddy, Paul Allen, they had even started their own little company back in high school.
No kidding.
Yeah, it was called Trafo Data. They were analyzing traffic patterns.
Wow. So they were already mini entrepreneurs back then.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But when they heard about the Altair, they knew they had to get in on the action.
It was their calling.
Yeah, something like that.
In BASIC, this programming language, it becomes a big part of the story, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, think about it. Back then, there weren't these user-friendly interfaces like we have now.
Yeah, it was all command lines and stuff.
So BASIC, it was this language that was designed to be easy to understand, easy to use.
Exactly. It was meant to be accessible, even for beginners.
And Gates, He saw the opportunity to, like, bring BASIC to the Altair.
He did. And that made a huge difference.
Right. It made it possible for regular people to actually use these machines.
Yeah. It wasn't just about, like, technical wizardry anymore. It was about making these computers actually useful.
It was about opening up this whole new world to people.
That's it. Exactly.
I mean, it's crazy to think that this company that's now a global giant started out in a sandwich shop writing code for this computer that, well, most people had never even seen.
It's pretty wild, right?
It is. But I guess that just shows you what a little bit of vision and a lot of hard work can do.
It really does.
So they port BASIC to the Altair. That's their first big move.
It is.
But it's not just about that one computer, is it?
Nope. They had a much bigger vision.
They did.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They saw software not just as, like, a tool for running a specific machine, but as a product, a valuable product. That was their software factory vision to create all sorts of programs, high-quality programs that would make personal computers more powerful, more user-friendly.
So, like, their own little software empire.
You could say that.
Wow. So they had this big plan, but the personal computer world was, like, changing so fast back then, right?
Oh, yeah. It was a whirlwind.
New companies popping up all the time. It must have been a wild ride.
It was. Gates talks about this explosion of activity with companies like processor technology. They were making add-ons for the Altair.
Okay.
And then, of course, you had Apple with Wozniak and Jobs doing their thing.
Right. Wozniak, the engineering genius, and Jobs, the marketing whiz.
Exactly. It's interesting how all these different approaches to this whole PC thing started to emerge.
Yeah, like processor technology was all about expanding what these machines could do. And Apple, they were focused on making computers more user-friendly, more integrated.
Right. It was a real melting pot of ideas, and nobody knew for sure what was going to stick.
It sounds like a pretty exciting, but also pretty unpredictable time.
Oh, it was both, that's for sure.
Well, let's shift gears a bit and talk about life at Microsoft.
Microsoft.
Yeah, that's what they called it back then, with a hyphen.
Huh? I didn't know that.
Yeah. So what was it like working at this tiny startup in those early days?
Well, let's just say it wasn't all that glamorous.
Oh, I bet.
Gates describes it as pretty Spartan, to put it mildly.
Spartan, huh?
Imagine, like, a shared apartment, late nights hunched over code, crashing on the floor when deadlines were looming.
Yikes.
And eating every meal from takeout joints.
Doesn't sound very glamorous.
Not exactly. It's a far cry from the image of Microsoft we have today, right?
It really is. But it sounds like they were, like, living and breathing code, fueled by pure passion.
And probably a whole lot of caffeine.
Probably. And let's not forget Paul Allen's infamous Blue Monza.
Oh, yeah, the death trap.
That's the one.
Yeah.
It's like a symbol of their youthful energy, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit of recklessness, too.
A little bit, yeah. But, hey, they were young guys, barely out of their teens, throwing themselves into this crazy venture.
They were all in, weren't they?
Totally. Driven by this belief that software could change the world and that they were the ones to make it happen.
It's inspiring, in a way.
It is.
But it wasn't all, like, smooth sailing, was it?
Oh, no, not at all.
Gates talks about, like, growing disillusionment with company politics at MIT.
Yeah.
Employee frustration. It sounds like things were getting a little tense.
They were.
I mean, these early computers, they weren't exactly reliable, were they?
Nope. The hardware was always acting up, crashing, all sorts of problems.
And imagine trying to write software for a machine that's constantly malfunctioning.
Yeah, it was a nightmare.
Gates felt like MIT wasn't taking these issues seriously enough, and he wasn't afraid to, like, speak his mind about it.
He wasn't, which, well, didn't always make him the most popular guy.
Right, so you've got this young, ambitious company butting heads with their main client, and then there's this big elephant in the room.
Which is?
Piracy.
Ah, yes.
Piracy that would, like, define the entire software industry.
It's true.
I mean, back then, the idea of paying for software was almost unheard of, right?
Especially in the hobbyist community.
Yeah. It was all about sharing, copying, borrowing.
Borrowing, right?
It's hard to imagine now in a world where we pay for apps, subscriptions, everything.
It's a different world now.
It really is. But for Gates and Allen, it was a huge problem.
Oh, yeah.
They were pouring their hearts and souls into developing the software, but hardly anyone was actually paying for it.
Their version of BASIC, it was being copied everywhere.
And they were barely seeing any royalties.
It must have been incredibly frustrating.
You can just sense that frustration in Gates' writing, can't you?
Oh, absolutely. Like this clash between wanting to build a successful business, and the culture of the time where software was just seen as this free thing.
Right. And it all boils over with his open letter to hobbyists.
Ah, yes, the infamous letter.
It's a huge moment, not just for Microsoft, but for the whole software world.
It really is. It's like he drew a line in the sand.
But before we get into that, let's take a step back for a second.
Okay.
And consider the bigger picture. I mean, you've got this incredible boom in personal computer adoption.
Right.
But nobody really knows how software should be developed, distributed, or even valued.
It was the Wild West software-wise.
It was. And into this crazy world steps Bill Gates.
With a very strong opinion?
With a very strong opinion that software is a valuable product.
Not just some freebie.
Not just some freebie. And that's what sets the stage for this whole debate that, well, honestly, we're still having today.
We are.
It's a clash of ideologies, and it all starts with this letter. But we'll have to dive into that next time.
I'm intrigued.
Me too. So join us again as we unpack this infamous letter, the reactions it sparked, and what it tells us about how people viewed software back then.
Sounds good.
We'll see you then.
Looking forward to it.
Okay, so we left off with this real tension brewing, right? This young, ambitious company, Microsoft, they're facing all these technical challenges.
Right.
They're navigating this crazy market that's changing all the time. And they're dealing with this widespread belief that software should just be free.
Yeah.
And then, bam, Gates publishes this open letter to hobbyists.
It's quite something.
It really is. It's like a shot heard around the world, or at least the world of personal computing.
That's a good way to put it.
It is. It's a fascinating document, really.
It is.
You've got this young Bill Gates.
Barely 20 years old at the time.
Yeah. And he's basically accusing like a huge chunk of his potential customers of stealing.
He doesn't mince words.
He doesn't. He lays out his argument step by step,
Yeah.
explains why software has value, why developers deserve to be paid for their work.
Makes sense.
Right. And how piracy is actually hurting the growth of the whole industry.
He's not wrong.
He's not. But it's a bold move, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, it sparks all this controversy.
People were not happy.
It's hard to fathom today, this idea of software being freely copied and shared, you know.
I know, right? It's so different from how we think about it now.
It is. But back then, that was like the norm.
It was.
So how did people react to Gates's letter? Did they see his point of view?
Well, the reaction was, let's just say it was mixed.
Mixed, huh?
Some folks, especially the ones who saw the potential for a real commercial software market, they applauded Gates for taking a stand.
They did?
Oh, yeah. They thought it was about time someone said something.
I see.
But a lot of people in the hobbyist community, they were furious.
Oh, I bet.
They saw it as like an attack on their values, you know?
Yeah.
Their belief in open access, free information sharing.
Like he was trying to take something away from them.
Exactly. And even Ed Roberts, the founder of MIT's.
The sandwich shop guy.
The sandwich shop guy, yeah. He was livid.
Oh, wow.
He felt like Gates had like publicly insulted his customers.
Ouch.
And misrepresented MIT's whole stance on software.
So it was a turning point, but maybe not in the way Gates had hoped.
Yeah, it definitely created more division within the community.
It did, didn't it?
It did. And it's interesting, you know, because this debate, in a lot of ways, it's still going on today.
It is, isn't it?
Think about, like, open source software, the arguments about digital rights management.
Yeah.
The tension between innovation and accessibility, it's all connected.
It all goes back to that letter, in a way.
In a way, it does. Whether you agree with Gates or not, he forced people to think about what software is worth.
And who benefits from it.
Exactly. It's a question we're still grappling with.
We are. So amidst all this controversy, there's this pivotal moment for Microsoft, right? A deal that really changes everything.
You're talking about the NCR deal.
That's the one. This deal with NCR, a major computer manufacturer.
Big time player.
They come to Microsoft and they want them to adapt their basic software for a new line of point-of-sale terminals.
Like cash registers.
Like cash registers, exactly.
Wow.
And the price tag for this, $150,000.
That's a lot of dough.
Especially back then. I mean, that must have felt like winning the lottery for a tiny company like Microsoft.
Oh, absolutely. It was huge for them.
But it wasn't just about the money, was it?
No, it was about so much more than that.
What do you mean?
This deal, it was like validation.
Validation.
Yeah, like the industry was finally taking them seriously.
I see.
NCR, this big established company, was saying, hey, we believe in you guys. We believe in your software.
So it gave them credibility?
Tons of it. And financial stability, which, they definitely needed.
It did. It did. It gave them the breathing room to keep going, to keep growing.
Exactly. And it also gave them confidence.
Confidence.
Yeah, like, hey, we can do this. We're on the right track.
That's so important, that belief in yourself, especially when you're starting out.
It really is.
So this is where Microsoft starts to, transform from this scrappy little startup.
Into a real company.
Into a real company. They hired their first employee, Mark McDonald. And Gates, who's still a student at Harvard, mind you, he works out this formal partnership agreement with Alan and their friend, Rick Weiland, this programmer they knew.
Wow. Talk about juggling a lot of things at once.
It's crazy. I mean, they're running a business, they're going to school, they're basically living on ramen noodles.
The classic startup story.
It is. And all this while they're laying the groundwork for what would become, one of the biggest companies in the world.
It's mind-boggling when you think about it.
It really is.
Okay.
So let's talk about your business plan. Gates mentions this document scribbled on 7 pages of copier paper.
Nothing fancy.
Nothing fancy.
Yeah.
So what were their priorities? What was their vision for the future?
Well, their plan, it was actually pretty simple. They emphasized frugality, keeping costs low, setting modest salaries for themselves, and focusing on growth and reputation over making a quick buck.
They were in it for the long haul.
They were.
It's interesting, this whole bootstrapping mentality.
Yeah.
It seems to be a big part of their story, doesn't it?
It does.
From that sandwich shop to their financial decisions, they were willing to start small and build their way up.
It's a testament to their belief in themselves and in their vision.
And in software.
They saw it as the driving force behind this whole personal computer revolution.
And they were determined to be at the forefront of it.
Absolutely. They weren't just along for the ride. They wanted to lead the way.
So they had the talent, the vision, the work ethic. But there was something else too, wasn't there?
What do you mean?
Like a certain fearlessness.
Oh, yeah.
A willingness to take risks.
Definitely. They weren't afraid to challenge the status quo.
Like with that letter.
Exactly. That letter was a huge gamble.
It was.
But it paid off, in a way.
It did. It forced people to take software seriously.
It did. And it set the stage for the software revolution that we're still living through today.
It's amazing to think about how it all started,
It really is.
But before we get too carried away with the present, let's take a step back.
Okay.
And consider the historical context a bit more.
Sounds good.
We've been talking about these early days at Microsoft, their struggles and their triumphs.
Yeah.
And this really unwavering belief they had in the power of software.
It's pretty remarkable.
It is. And all of this is happening, against the backdrop of this rapidly changing industry. I mean, back then, the very definition of a personal computer was still being fleshed out.
Yeah, it was a whole new world.
It was. It really was. And the world itself is a very different place.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, think about it. The internet as we know it, it didn't exist.
Oh.
Most people had never even seen a computer in person.
Let alone imagine having one in their home.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there was this feeling, this sense that something big was happening.
A shift in the air.
Yeah, a shift. And Gates, he captures that feeling so well in his book. He talks about all these new companies popping up, the constant innovation, this sense that anything was possible.
The energy must have been incredible.
Oh, it was. It was a time of immense creativity, experimentation, people pushing the limits of technology, challenging the way things were done.
And at the heart of it all, this question: what could these machines actually do?
That's the big question, isn't it? And that's where software comes in.
Right. It's the link between the hardware, the physical machine, and the person who wants to use it to actually do something with it.
It's like the translator.
It is. Software is the language that allows us to talk to these machines to make them do all these amazing things.
And Gates, he understood that from the very beginning.
He did.
He saw software as the key to making these computers, not just powerful,
but accessible.
And useful to everyone.
That was his big idea.
It was. It wasn't just about writing code. It was about creating tools that would empower people.
Make their lives easier.
Make their lives easier, more productive, more connected.
And that focus on the user experience, I think that's been a constant throughout Microsoft's history.
I think you're right. It's part of their DNA. But going back to those early days, it's clear that Gates was a visionary.
Oh, yeah.
He could see the big picture, But he was also a pragmatist.
Meaning?
I mean, he wasn't afraid to get down in the trenches, to get his hands dirty.
He was in it with his team.
He was. He'd work alongside them, push them to be their best.
And that combination, that vision, and that get-it-done attitude, that's what allowed Microsoft to survive those early years.
And become what they are today.
Exactly. They didn't just ride the wave. They helped create it.
They did. They had the talent, they had the vision, the work ethic.
But there was something else, too, wasn't there?
What do you mean?
A certain boldness, a willingness to take risks.
They weren't afraid to ruffle some feathers?
Nope. They'd stand up for what they believed in, even if it meant making some enemies along the way.
Like with that open letter to hobbyists.
That was a big risk.
It was a huge risk.
But it changed everything.
It did. It made people see software in a new light.
And it helped lay the foundation for the software-driven world we live in today.
From a sandwich shop to a global tech giant.
It's quite a story.
It is. And it all goes to show what can happen when you have a vision, when you're willing to work hard.
And when you're not afraid to take a chance.
It's a story about innovation, about entrepreneurship, about the power of an idea.
And about the people who dared to dream big.
Well said. Well, folks, that's our deep dive into the birth of Microsoft. We hope you enjoyed the journey.
It's been fascinating.
It has. Until next time, keep exploring, keep